Hello, everyone. Sarah Barker with the very first Senior Care Sales Solutions podcast. I'm very excited to have with me today Beth Niemann. She is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing with ClearPath Home Care. And I've had the pleasure of getting to know her, I think over the last 4 or 5 months. And she is a dynamo when it comes to sales and marketing and business development. So today we're going to be talking about the concept of faith over fear. And how you can get over that fear. And fear is often limiting business developers' ability to get results. We're going to be talking about finding fulfillment in being a business developer in the senior care industry, and also how can we overcome the imposter syndrome. So rather than listing out everything that we're going to talk about, why don't we go ahead and turn the stage over to Beth to talk about these very important concepts when it comes to doing business development.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's such an honor to be the first one on the sales podcast.
I'm very excited.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that everybody needs to think about when we really dive into sales is what is it that gives us fear? So if we don't really fully reflect and understand that, we can't address it within ourselves. So sometimes that's hard because you have to ask yourself some hard questions, and not only ask yourself the hard question, but you have to give yourself some really honest answers. And sometimes that's hard. I think people don't want to do that. So I always think, okay, if you have to get into a quiet place in your mind, not necessarily a quiet environment, wherever you feel like you can get quiet in your mind to really reflect on that. But also ask friends, like really friends who will give you the real honest answers, right? And even, your mentors or your boss or your peers, because those people will give you some honest answers too. But what you have to be ready for is their answer and be okay
you have
with
to be ready to hear it, because sometimes it's not.
It's not always rainbows and butterflies, right?
Right. So, what's a good example of that? We can talk about that. If there's a business developer and they keep saying, no, I'm having the right activity, I'm doing the right stuff. But then if they seek that feedback about what am I doing wrong, be open to hearing, no, you're actually not being efficient with managing your time or talking to the right people. And I think you're absolutely right. It's hard to receive that honest feedback from a manager, a friend, a peer, even.
Yeah. I think people get stuck on the outcome, the outcome of a conversation, the outcome of a meeting, the outcome of what your sales goals are for the month. You get so wrapped up and caught up in what the outcome is that you forget to be in the moment. Mm-hmm. And when you're not in the moment, like if you're having a conversation with somebody, a referral source, or even a client, how are you going to really capture the heart of what is going on in that conversation and be present if you're thinking about, oh, how is this going to go? And what are people going to think if I say this or I mess up, or, whatever the case may be? They're not in the moment and really treasuring the things that can come out of those conversations or those moments or those learning opportunities, because they're busy thinking about, oh, the outcome.
Right. And it can come across that sense of desperation, which tends to be off-putting, right, as an energy. And so would you say it's safe to say that if they're so focused on the outcome and not being present in the interaction, it's really hard to foster that authentic connection?
Yeah.
And that's where relationships develop.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, so we can talk about a little bit about fear too. People have their own fears for whatever reason, and fears can be the result of manifestations of other feelings. So maybe you're angry, or you're worried, or you've got some other emotion that's manifesting and coming across as fear. So I think people really have to reflect on what that fear is and why that fear is happening. I mean, I do it all the time where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go in and talk to that person. They're so much smarter than me. They're, so much better than me. They don't have time for me. And I make all these excuses in my mind, like I'm making all the excuses for them. They may have no excuse, but I'm doing it for them. Why do we do that to ourselves? I don't understand why, but really saying, okay, that's me talking for them. I need to just take a step back, pause, say, okay, let me get in the moment. Let me say a prayer. I do that a lot. I say prayers a lot of times before I go into meetings, because I feel like that for me recenters me. And then say, okay, are all these things I'm telling myself true? Which they're probably not true, because we tell ourselves lies all the time. So, and having that honest conversation with myself, saying, okay, these are just lies I'm telling myself. There's nothing to be afraid of. The worst anybody's going to say to me is no. I hear that all day, every day as a salesperson. Yeah. So, everything's going to be fine. And you just go in and you do it and be your authentic self.
That's great advice. And I like how you said you'll say a prayer and then recognize, okay, I'm telling myself that lie. And I developed this exercise myself a couple of years ago now. And I put some visualization to it, which is when we have that thought, I actually picture in my mind that I've pulled up a Word document. And it's like I've typed out the question, whatever it is that I'm telling myself. And then, as you said, you ask the question, is this true? Yes or no?
Right.
If the answer is no, then you can visualize, okay, I'm just bullet pointing why it's not true. One, I'm assuming that they don't want to see me. I'm assuming they're not available. I'm assuming all these things. Or sometimes if there is some truth to it, yes, well, then I can say, well, maybe I need to change my approach a bit. Maybe I need to ask some different questions. So I love that. We do have our first comment. The power of the mind and manifestation is everything. But you are right. While you can manifest good, you can do just the opposite with your negative thoughts too.
So I love that, because it's like negative in, negative out, right? The more negative you let come in, the more is going to come out of you. But I also think it's the negative within that also will come out. So if you're constantly feeding your own self these negative thoughts, that's what's going to come out. So who loves going into a room? I mean, sometimes that's why I don't want to go into a meeting. I'm like, oh, I got to go into this meeting and this person's always negative, and you don't want to be around that, because negative it just feeds that yuckiness. And then you're just spewing that out to whoever else you're with for the day. So it's important to to recognize it, everybody's going through something, right? But you're not going through what they're going through, but you have to let them go through what they're going through. It's okay. You can recognize, that person's just having a bad day, a bad time, a bad minute, and that's okay. That's their feelings. That's theirs. That's for them to do. That's not for me. I recognize it, I empathize with it, but it's not for me. And I'm not going to carry that with me and take that to all of my friends.
Right. And I think so it's mindset, and I see this with business developers. It's even if they are going into the referral source and they are even asking the right questions and they're smiling, but if internally there's that negative thoughts, right? It really is affecting the energy that's felt, right? And how they're being perceived. Even if you're saying the right things, it's how it's coming across, right? What people are picking up from you. So I think the takeaway from this for the business developers listening is put it into your schedule, like pause before you go into the referral source, take a deep breath, check in with yourself, right? And make sure that you're eliminating those negative thoughts. And my good friend Liz, who you've met, right? She tells the story about struggling with these negative thoughts, before she's going into a skilled nursing facility, but she will pump herself up and say, I know I'm of value. They have a client for me. They need me, right? And so now when she enters the building, she's in a different state of mind and different energy.
Yeah. I think energy is everything. I listen to a lot of different people that talk about your vibrational frequency. And, people are fired. There's some people that run hot, man. They run hot. And sometimes that hot is negativity hot, which is not good, but you have to know how to take that process, give some grace for that person and move on, but not to internalize it and then spew it out to the rest of the world. I always think it's so important to know who your internal people are and to be careful who you allow to be in that really tight inner circle of the people you surround yourself with. Because if you're surrounding yourself at all times with people that are, constantly feeding into that negative stuff, you're going to absorb that and then take that with you. But if I always want to be the dumbest person in the room, because that means everybody around me is smarter than me and everybody around me is good vibing. And then I'm going to be that, I'm by osmosis, I'm going to take that in, and then I'm going to be able to give that back out to other people.
Right. And some people listening may be thinking right now, like, you guys aren't talking about the tactics of sales, right? Yes, there's all that, right? Referral source, right people in the account, right questions, right frequency, all of that. But if we don't get this part right first,
exactly,
that stuff doesn't matter.
Exactly. Because people can smell it a mile away. They can. If you're not in your true authentic self, I mean, you talk to plenty of referral sources. You walk in and you've gone in there 12 times. You kind of know this person by that point. When you walk in and they just have this look on their face where they're really trying to smile and put it on for you, but they're not having a good day or a good minute or a good hour. And you're just like, oh, are you okay? Is everything all right?
I'm so glad that you said that, because that was going to be my suggestion to the business developers. When you pick up on that, but you're not going to be able to pick up on that with your referral sources unless you have gotten yourself into the mindset of being present.
Right.
You recognize it. But when you notice one of your referral sources is kind of off, don't be afraid to simply ask them, are you okay today? Yeah. Because that's really where we get depth in our relationships, the personal side, right? Exactly. Of course, there's the business side. But okay, so Beth, you have a ton of experience. Maybe this is a good time for you to share with the audience. So you're with ClearPath Home Care, right? Vice President, Sales and Marketing, but you come to the table with a lot of background in our industry. So would you mind sharing with the audience what your background is?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a PTA by background. I've been a physical therapist assistant since, we're going on 23 years this year. And even prior to becoming a therapist, I was a caregiver. I worked in memory care facilities. I worked as a caregiver going out to the community at large. So I've done this since probably I was 19, probably 18 or 19 years old. I've been in caregiving, senior care, memory care, working with dementia. So as a therapist, I held many different roles, from contract therapist to staff therapist, treating therapist. I knew from a really young into my career that I wanted to do more. I felt a really deep calling for a higher purpose. I still feel like I have a deep calling for a higher purpose in my life. And my boyfriend, who at the time, who's now my husband, always said, why would you want to do more than what you're already doing? I'm like, it's so deep in me. And I think people who have that deep drive, just, you can't ignore it. Right. So I became a rehab director, and then got into multi-site operations for therapy departments, oversaw, skilled nursing facilities, assisted living, independent living, home health contracts, wellness contracts. So I did really the whole gamut there. And then quickly went right into business development solely over multi-state, different types of environments there, different types of contracts. I knew probably 3 to 5 years ago that I was ready to move on from therapy. Again, because I felt like I have a deeper calling. I got to know Jam and Michelle years ago. I knew when I met them that I just absolutely loved them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've just stayed in contact all these years. And then in December, we decided to come on board and get the ball rolling here at ClearPath. And I'm just over the moon excited about it and not regretting a day of this choice.
I know they were so excited to get you, and they are wonderful people.
They are.
So in all of this experience, and then in your current role, what would you say, where do you start in developing the sales mindset? I think even people that are accepting these roles as being salespeople for home care companies, right? It's like they don't want to admit that they're a salesperson.
Yeah.
And so you have to accept the fact that you are in sales, and yes, you are selling things, and it does help people, right? Of course. But how can someone get into the sales mindset, and what does that mean?
I think that's a great question, because in all transparency, I still do not consider myself a salesperson. I consider myself a therapist first, and I will always think of myself as a salesperson or as a therapist first. But from a sales perspective and driving sales, I think the most important is, the relationship part of it. I hear it over and over and over again. And from referral sources even too, saying, I really don't care if you give me a brochure. I want to know that when I refer you a client, that you're going to take really good care of them. I want to have a good relationship with you to where I can call you and say, hey, so-and-so needs help. They need it right away. What can you do to help me get this done? Whether it's them using my services or not, how can we take care of this person? Or, hey, this is the problem going on. I need to have an honest conversation with you. So if that relationship is not there, those conversations are going to be so much harder to have. So I think from a sales perspective, that's where you have to start, is understanding that this is a relationship business first.
It is. Mm-hmm.
And even with clients too. I mean, it goes beyond the sales and referral source piece of it. It's even with clients. Clients are trusting us to have a very intimate conversation. A, they're inviting us into their home, and B, they're asking us to do something that is very intimate, taking care of their loved one. And so we have to be able to build trust. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is through relationships.
Through the relationships, not just rattling on or lecturing about ADLs.
Right? Yeah. I always say you don't want to diarrhea all over them what ClearPath Home Care is, or what home health, or whoever it is that you're representing. I mean, caregiving is caregiving, but what they want to know is, are you going to be there when they need them?
Mm-hmm. Who are you?
Who needs you?
Who are the other people in the agency? Yeah. Right. Why are you doing this work? Right. That's why, as part of the academy, we spend so much time on what is your deeper why, right? Because that's what's really going to resonate with people. Right. My good friend, Mike Nally, thank you for always participating in these podcasts, Mike. So he says, so wonderful hearing what motivates you every day. In sales and marketing, how have you been able to get past gatekeepers?
Oh man, that's the question of the hour. I think that it's important to recognize that gatekeepers are people too. I think people forget that you need to build a relationship with them just as well as the person that's actually going to give you the referrals. Gatekeepers are key. They're key people in the organization where they work. Mm-hmm. They are key people. A lot of times they know more of what's going on there than anybody else does. So they're a vital part. And I think just that little bit of recognition of that is important, and building that relationship with that person, whether that's, writing them a little note or leaving them a Bible verse if they're, into that kind of thing. Sometimes that's all I need. Somebody would just say, I'm thinking about you today. Oh, that touched me so much. Or leaving them a little plant to put on their desk, or something that's just for them.
Just for them. I like that. Mm-hmm. And exactly, we need to see them for the people that they are, and stop just thinking of them as gatekeeper, right? Thinking about their role, them as a person. And so I like your suggestion about the note. And what I've advised some clients, right, when let's say they're introducing themselves for the first time to an account because they've just accepted the role as a business developer for an agency. and they hit the gatekeeper. The social worker's not available, right? It happens all the time. So my advice, if that happens, the next week when you go back, don't even ask the gatekeeper to speak to the social worker that week. Go back and just bring something for the gatekeeper and see how their day is going, right? Because gatekeepers all the time are just hearing, I need to speak to the social worker. Is the social worker there? Or when marketers are bringing the gifts, the coffees, all that, they're just bringing it from the social worker, the DON, the administrator, and leaving the gatekeeper out.
Yeah.
So spot on. The gatekeeper is a person who deserves to be valued and appreciated just as much.
Agreed. 100%. 100%. The other thing too, just a sidebar, another little trick of the trade is I won't ask for the same person every time either. If I continually ask for a certain person, even after I've really gotten to know that gatekeeper, I'll have a few people in my back pocket that I want to talk to that I think could potentially be a champion into getting to the person I actually need to get to.
I like that. And that's what we refer to as the pattern disruptor. So you go back and everybody usually is social worker every single time, but maybe you go back 1 week and you disrupt the pattern, right? And you ask to speak to somebody else that week.
Yeah.
I love that.
For sure. Yeah.
What are some techniques in establishing a more positive mindset? So you talked about saying a prayer, but what are some other things that a business developer can do to really establish a positive mindset that's ongoing?
Yeah, I think it's a commitment that you have to make to yourself. So you really have to think about what is my mental or my emotional home? Where do I tend to live in my emotions? Am I usually a worrier? Am I usually, somebody who gets ramped up pretty easily? So first figuring out what is my emotional home, and then kind of reprogram yourself. So is there, a lot of people, if you listen to songs, they kind of take you back. Like I hear certain songs, I'm like, oh, I love that song. It reminds me of this person or this really great time that I had. So maybe it's a song that you listen to that kind of brings you back into that mindset of positivity. I listen to a lot of worship music. That gets me into a whole different, mindset. So maybe it's a music thing. Maybe it's I say a prayer for myself. So I'm a faithful person. So that's kind of where I go, but everybody kind of has their own way. It could just be like a few minutes of meditation in the morning. It could be, you carry a notebook around with yourself and you kind of journal as you go and be like, I have got to get this negative feeling out of my mind, and I've got to just get it somewhere. And in order to avoid infecting somebody else with your negativity, you just write it down real quick. Or maybe you have a colleague or a mentor that is really good at just knowing and understanding that you need a moment. Can just be your sounding board for 5 minutes while you just get it off your chest so you can just move about your day. So I always, you first have to figure out and understand where you kind of live in your mind. What are your triggers that get you there? And what are the things that get you out? And know that about yourself and recognize. And like you said before, it's the power of the pause. You have to know and recognize, I'm getting there where I'm getting triggered. Pause for a minute, recognize and know it's there, and be like, okay, I've got to do the thing, whatever it is that gets me to say, I've dealt with that, now I can move on.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so important too, especially for agencies that have multiple business developers, right? Because I've seen this over the years where there's an employee in a company, right? And if they're of that negative mindset, not being self-aware, not taking the measures that we've talked about, they can almost become cancerous to the organization, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a perfect time for the next question, right? What do you do when you have negativity coming into your space during the day? And so any agency owner listening right now that has multiple marketers, this is something that your people should listen to. What can they do to protect their space and to kind of push off any negativity that comes at them?
Yeah, I think it's good to recognize it, because Although, with my team, we do the positivity pledge. That's something we do in our trainings every quarter. I said, okay, everybody, this is the positivity pledge. There's 10 items on there, and everybody has to agree to all of those things. We're going to be positive. Now, that being said, does that mean that we're never going to recognize the negative things? No. I mean, there are going to be negative things. They are going to come into our environment. And they might be something that comes from, something in our own circle. It could be, a death in the family from one of our teammates. It could be something going on in our own personal life that brings that little bit of negativity. But we have to say, okay, I see that and I recognize it, and not ignore it. Recognize that it's there. Give a moment to it. And take care of what you need to take care of in that moment for that thing. And then say, okay, I've taken that, I've dealt with that. And now I'm going to go back to my day and be in my positive world. I think you can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. Right. And I think that's the important thing to know it. And I think that's the part that people mess up on, is they're just like, oh, no negativity here. This is a no negative environment. Like, that's not real world, right?
It's not real world. And then there's the other side of that where it's negativity all the time, and we'll just call it drama, right?
Right.
And so I think the concept of compartmentalizing kind of gets a bad rap, because personally, as I've gotten older, I think it's a really valuable skill to be able to compartmentalize. It doesn't mean that you ignore the problem. It just means that you're able to still focus on what you have to do, keep that positive mindset, and then give whatever the issue is time outside of the workday, or time that makes sense, so it doesn't interfere in what you have to do for your job.
And really, when it comes to that negativity, and we're talking about these smaller agencies, or even, a larger agency, we have to think about who are the people on this bus. Do we have all the right people here? Because if they're the person that is interrupting the forward motion of this bus, and this bus is going to go forward at ClearPath Home Care, we're going forward.
Yeah.
If you are not ready to move forward and be there 100%, then you're not maybe on the right seat here. So as business owners and agency operators, that is really hard. But you have to decide, is that person that's continually bringing negativity in the right person for your organization? And I realize those are hard decisions to make, but for the good of everybody else, that person just not, and that's the same as your inner circle. It's the same as family. We all have family members that just, I mean, I have my oldest brother. He is the most negative person I have ever met in my life. And it is very hard to have a relationship with him. And so you have to decide, how is that relationship with that person going to work? And you put up those boundaries of, I'm giving this person this much of me, and that's all I'm going to give them.
Exactly, because it will impact you and how you're showing up with the other relationships. And I would say that this even applies to referral partners.
So yeah,
years ago, an estate planning attorney, referral source of mine, sent clients, not sure what happened, but the relationship became very difficult. A lot of negativity. And I had actually brought a care manager into a case, and it just, I don't know how to describe it other than I started to recognize this is not a good relationship anymore. Yeah. And so it takes courage to say, oh yeah, but they give me referrals. And so you don't want to walk away. But when you start recognizing that it's having a negative impact on you and maybe the other relationships you're bringing into situations, like, you have to have that courage to sever the tie and have the faith that you will be able to replace those referrals through another referral source, right? Because you have guarded your environment, right? Your mental state.
Exactly. We talk about that a lot with our team, is, not every referral source is for us, and that's okay. We have to be okay with not everybody is aligned with us, and not from a professional organizational standpoint and from a personal standpoint. And we have to be okay with that.
Yes, absolutely. The mindset of abundance too. So we have another question from Miss Ruth in Florida. She asked, can you comment on this idea for networking events? And I believe she's talking about the mindset. I'm not really sure what this is related to, or if it's getting past gatekeeper. I think it's the mindset, going in with a positive mindset into referral sources. And she's saying that she struggles with this when it comes to actually attending networking events. She said, I find these tougher than actually working with our targets. So the referral targets.
Yeah. And so networking events, for me, they can be very overwhelming, right? Because depending on where you are, you may walk in and you know everybody. And there are some where you walk in and you know nobody. And sometimes we were in Colorado last week and I walked into a networking group and it was a very large group. They obviously all knew each other super well, and I knew nobody. So how do you walk into that where you're like, how do I even get in there? So I think it takes, and this sounds kind of silly, but it takes just 6 seconds of intense bravery. I cannot remember where I heard this, but somebody once said it to me and it stuck with me, of like, when you're going to ask somebody out for the first time, you're like, I just need 6 seconds of intense bravery, right? So just having that mindset of like, okay, I don't really know how to approach this situation, but everybody's there to network. Salespeople love to talk and they love to talk to each other. So just walk up and say, hey, my name is, and it takes that 6 seconds of intense bravery.
Exactly. I think people really get in their heads too much about this, not to diminish how the fear feels, right? Walking into that room, not knowing anybody. But the only solution that Beth and I have for you is walk into the room, walk up to the people and say hello. That is the only starting point. And maybe, craft kind of an opening, not a statement, but an opening question. I am such a believer in question-based conversations for a business developer, not, we talked about it earlier, like vomiting about services, but it's like, guys, it's a networking event. People are expecting for you to ask them what they do.
Yeah. And I have found exactly what you're saying. I go in and say, hey, my name is Beth. I'm with ClearPath. What do you do? Where are you from? Where does it? And I start with the questions, and then I just keep asking them questions. And eventually they're like, who is this person? I want to know where they're from. What do they do? And then they start asking me. And then that gives me the opportunity to then tell them about ClearPath without me feeling like I'm spewing all over that way.
Exactly. Question-based selling.
Yep.
And it keeps the conversation going, because if you're just talking to someone, talking at someone, what room are you giving them, or what room are you creating for yourself to keep the conversation going? Right.
A lot of times a lot of times they're checking out.
Let's talk about imposter syndrome. I was thinking about this morning, matter of fact, for myself. So very timely. The thoughts, right, where you're like, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, or am I good, or do people like me? So Beth, have you ever felt imposter syndrome?
It's like every day. I pinch myself sometimes. It's every day of feeling that way. And maybe some days it's a fleeting thought, but I think when God starts putting you in really uncomfortable situations, it's because you're about to have immense growth, and you're in those uncomfortable situations. They're so unfamiliar to you, but he wouldn't put you there unless he knew for sure that you were in the right spot. So I think, whenever that comes to me, that feeling of, man, I am definitely not the smartest person in this room, and I'm not even sure I really belong in this room, but gosh darn it, I am going to learn everything that I can from this moment and go with it. So I think that is really a very normal feeling when you're growing, is to feel like that imposter syndrome. Like, am I sure? What were JM and Michelle thinking about hiring me?
I'm so glad that we can admit these things and share vulnerably with the audience, because I think probably just about every single business developer, owner has this problem, but they're like afraid to admit it, right? And I think it's something that should be talked about more, so that way we can encourage each other and say, no, you're actually really smart. No, you're actually a really good leader. You're doing great.
Yeah. And actually you're learning a whole lot right now, and you're going to contribute to, society and what you're learning from in this moment. So and just having the mindset of, I want to grow. Like, I know I do. I know 100% I want to grow and learn every single day. And so if that means that I feel like an imposter sometimes, then so be it.
And I think you and I, since we're talking a lot about faith and God, I mean, I consider those moments when that imposter syndrome thoughts, it's almost like an evil spiritual attack. That's what it feels like to me. And so let's talk about when you are feeling the imposter syndrome, when I feel it, and I would love to hear from the audience. What do you do to overcome those moments?
I'm glad you asked that question, because there's a lot, and I'm always go back to spiritual things because that's how I do it. But, in the Bible, it talks a lot about your thoughts, and it talks a lot about controlling your thoughts. And it talks a lot about how we every human has the capability of controlling our thoughts. So it's going back and saying, all right, what am I thinking? And do I belong in this room? I mean, I don't know, but I'm going to just say yes. I'm going to slash that out and say, yes, I belong in this room. I've worked really hard to get where I am right now. I have an intense, deep desire to grow. I have an intense, deep desire to fulfill my purpose. And if that means that I'm going to be in a very uncomfortable situation, then I'm going to do it. But that is my my very intentional way of going in and controlling the thought that I'm attaching to that situation.
Right. And for me, what that brings up is rebuking that thought, the imposter syndrome thought. You have to actively, and I really want the audience to listen to this, because again, I know a lot of you struggle with it, and Beth and I are here being vulnerable and saying we do too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But you cannot wallow in those thoughts. You can't let it keep talking to you. You have to actually verbally even rebuke that imposter syndrome thought and say, nope, shut up. Imposter syndrome thought. I belong here. I've worked hard. I'm learning. I may not be perfect or the best, but I'm trying, right? I know I'm doing everything I can. So I really want you guys to listen to that advice, because, and maybe you can chime in on this, Beth. When somebody wallows in the imposter syndrome thoughts, it really stops their progression.
Yeah.
Right? It impedes growth.
100%. 100%. And I was actually talking with a couple of people that I feel like are amazing humans and really way smarter than me. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm sitting with the two of these people. But I'm sitting there talking to them, and we were talking about this kind of topic. And I said, you know what? I always want to be the dumbest person in the room. And then all three of us at the same time, I'm the dumbest. So we tried to, even made a game out of it. But everybody wants, I want to be the dumbest person in the room, because that means but you have to turn your mindset to that direction. That's what I want. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room all the time. I want to be the dumbest person, because that means I'm going to be learning and getting massive growth from those moments. So it is a mindset shift, but you have to figure out what are those, again, you have to figure out what are those triggers that get you there. You have to recognize that it's happening. You have to pause, and then you have to manually control the thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it feels goofy for people. Like the stuff that we're talking about right now, I know when I started thinking about it or taking action to fight against it, right? You feel goofy. Am I going to talk to myself? Or, the whole concept of the affirmations or
Yeah.
writing notes, but it works. And
Yeah.
so anybody listening, if you're struggling with this stuff, Beth and I are here to tell you, you have to take action on it. Don't sit with it too long.
Yeah. And I heard this other thing too that I really liked. And, I was struggling with my daughter. Here's a little story. Struggling with my daughter. She was going to her very first track meet and she had so much negative self-talk. And I'm like, baby, you have to change. You're not going to perform at your optimal self if we continue down this road. She was like, Mom, be quiet. You know how kids are. They always know more than you. And so I finally went to Zoe, let me tell you about you. You are an amazing human. You are so strong. You are the most confident young lady I know. And so, and I'm just continuing to pour what I know, fully convicted about my daughter. And she was like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. And so it totally shifted her, but she had to hear it that way. So, it is harder to say, hey, Beth, let me tell you about you and do it to myself. So if you have, a trusted partner, a mentor, if you have, a colleague that you can call on and just say, look, please tell me about me. Please.
I like that.
For me, it's my husband. My husband is so great. I'm like, babe, I just don't know. I don't think I'm in the right room. He's like, Beth, let me tell you about you. You are so confident. You are such a great person. You have the best intention. And he will just go right. And he is so great at it. And I'm like, okay. All right. And then you start to turn yourself around and believe that about yourself. So it just another.
And I think that that's totally fine, right? I can imagine maybe somebody's listening. They're like, oh, so we should solicit compliments about ourselves. No, that's not
a reminder.
We're saying be vulnerable enough to share with the people that are close to you. Hey, I'm really struggling right now. And I need to hear it from you. That's going to get me out of this rut of thinking. And I'd also say, so this, I learned many years ago, fantastic owner, incredibly smart, very caring, but not the best about communicating, right? About, wow, I value you, or you're doing a great job. And so, I think it's important for managers or owners, right, of the agency to proactively recognize when someone has done something well.
Yeah.
Almost systemize it, put a thing on your calendar that says, today I am going to tell one employee something that they've done really well.
Yeah. In a handwritten note, in a quick text, in a video, in a voice text, any of those kinds of things are very personal and absolutely can turn somebody's day around so quickly.
And right, since this is a business development and sales podcast, why don't we do that with referral sources?
Oh, 100%.
It's not always just about talking about the services. And, of course, that's all a foregone conclusion, right? Right accounts, right people, questions, asking for the business, right? But if we're talking about establishing authentic relationships, if we had a really good interaction with someone, we resonated with someone, why not let them know we really enjoyed getting to know them, right? Or that, you saw the way that they spoke to one of their colleagues inside of the account, and you really appreciate the way that they interact with their colleagues, right? Recognizing these personal things about our referral sources and telling them that we recognize it.
Yeah. And sometimes, I'll get into pretty deep conversations with people and, hear some of their vulnerabilities and the things that they're struggling with. And then, and I've done it with you too. And I hear a podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh, Sarah really needs to hear it. So I'll share a podcast that's really uplifting that will, address that thing that was so close to them and emotional, but it addresses that thing. And to me, that's so personal. Like if somebody shares something like that with me, I'm like, oh my gosh, they thought of me. They really heard me, and they thought of me in that way to say, hey, let me share something to maybe help you past, that situation.
I think that is so important. Something that I like to do is if I learn something about a referral source on a topic, and I'll throw out a couple of ideas. So if I have a referral source and if I learned that they've had somebody in their life pass away, I will always give a book called The Light Between Us. Or if I learn about one of my referral sources that they had a really trying childhood, I have a certain book that I give to the person. So I like to give personalized gifts, not just, the same old branded stuff. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, right? You need to give up the trinkets, and that's part of the marketing strategy, but really listening to your referral sources about who they are, what are they going through, and giving them something personal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
Mm-hmm. To really strengthen that relationship.
Yeah, I think
right?
people appreciate really truly being heard and understood.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So Beth, you, with all of your experience, and you're managing a pretty sizable business development team for, a non-medical home care agency.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for other sales managers or owners that are doing the managing about, how to establish the relationship with the team members and how to keep them motivated, and, to create an environment of respect where they want to work?
Yeah, that's a great question. In all transparency, I feel like I still work on that every day. I think it's important to one, really truly understand your team, how they like to be communicated as individuals, how they like to be communicated with, what's their personality type, because it may not match your personality type. So understanding how that person likes to be communicated with. I think that's really step number one, because so much gets lost in translation with communication if we don't truly understand the way in which they can receive information the best. So I think that starts there. I also, every week on our calls with our team, we always address leadership skills. Even though that the business developers are not leading a team necessarily, they're a team of one, but they are still leaders, and recognizing them as such. So I think it's important that we are pouring into our team, our team members as leaders and leaders in the industry, because they need that skill set to then be able to identify who are the right referral sources for me. How do I build those people up? How do I create my inner circle with the people that are going to continue to lift me up as I lift them up? So I think the leadership piece for me is huge in team development. I think when they feel poured into, they're going to pour back to you. And really respecting them as individuals, I think is an important thing, because, I'm not necessarily looking for a team that's a bunch of yes men. I want them to challenge me when they have a question or when they have an idea. I want to know what those things are, because, maybe I'm not thinking through every situation, like they're seeing it out in the field. So I need to understand that. And I'm not going to know that unless they feel free enough to come to me to say those things.
Right. Safe. Right. And I like that. And I think that's a huge part of why you're such a great leader. And you talked about communication styles. I think that it takes a good leader who has humility to say, you know what, I need to recognize that my team members maybe they don't communicate the same way I do, or my preferred way of communicating, but in order to motivate them or have them receive, I need to adjust on my end, right? Because I think a lot of leaders or managers, it's like, I'm going to force my team members to communicate the way I do, right?
Right.
But why fight that battle? Be the leader and say, I'm going to learn how each of my members best communicate. And a good example of this, I'm what's called a bluff communicator, I have got to have the bottom line up front.
Yeah.
Or else I will visibly start to
I
see.
love that.
And I actually learned this when I was working for a company because another team member, we liked each other very much
Mhm.
and we worked well together, but it started to become apparent that I guess I was hurting her feelings, or I was seeming disrespectful, but it was more because she was someone that talked around the bush and we've got to have the small talk. And I was like, I can't be patient. I'm busy and I need you to tell me the point, get to the point. Right. But the company hired someone to meet with both of us, a communication coach, I guess you could call him. And it was so insightful that I learned it has to be a compromise.
Mhm.
She learned she had to tell me the bottom line up front, and then I could relax and I could receive. I realized that I can't do bottom line up front. I had to ask the small talk and then move to my point. But it was just a fascinating experience. And I think that more leaders need to recognize that when they're managing team members.
Yeah, 100%. I feel that to my core because I must also be a bluff person. I think you and I are both D's on the disc.
Oh yeah, I'm like, oh,
but it's definitely a skill set. And I still, it's a skill set I've worked really, really, really hard on. And I still do all the time because I very much am a direct and I want to know what, give it to me straight and let's do it. I don't have time for all that, but I realize that there are other people they really need that to feel connected. And so it's my job as the leader to know that and to give that to them.
I agree. Our good friend Mike Nally here, he said 62% of employees say they would work harder and stay more loyal if they knew they were appreciated and valued. And I would add into that, part of feeling appreciated and valued is they feel heard.
Yeah, 100%. And, going back to being the dumbest person in the room, I mean, I want to be the dumbest person in the room with my team. They all are special and have something to add that's unique to the team and to me. So I love hearing what their feedback is because there's always something we can take from the team and implement across the board.
100%. Again, Mike said, he asked if this is being recorded. Yes, Mike, it is streaming live and it will be downloaded and uploaded to the YouTube channel. Oh, he wants to show this to his entire sales team at their in-person summit in May. You're going to be famous,
Beth.
Yay! Let's see. I have to find this. And our dear friend, Miss Lorena Bowles, always something to learn from your team, from ClearPath. And she was saying that what you're talking is truth. 100%.
Love Lorena.
Well, Beth, are there any final things that you would like to share with the audience? I personally really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you for being my guest.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really, really had fun with this. This is something I could talk about all day because I have worked very hard on it and I still work very hard on my own personal mindset. I think my only parting words would be that every business developer and every manager of business developers needs to read and or learn, listen to podcasts, do personal development. If you aren't already providing leadership skills or personal development to your teams, that you absolutely need to be doing that. It's a huge part of what I do for myself every single day. But they need that too. They need that to continue to build them up and to drive them forward.
That's great advice. Again, thank you for being my guest. Anybody listening, of course, I have the Empowering Aging podcast, which is really talking about resources for seniors and their families. And today is the very first senior care sales podcast. So if you are in business development or sales within the senior care industry, or you are working for an industry resource, right? You're a resource partner and would like to come on the podcast, please reach out to me so I can get you scheduled. As a reminder, the very, very first virtual Senior Care Sales Solutions Academy kicks off tomorrow. Thank you to everyone who encouraged me to launch a virtual option. And then the next in-person Senior Care Sales Solutions Academy is in Florida, April 11th and 12th. And so there is still time to sign up for that. If you're interested, reach out to me. All right. Thank you so much, Beth.
Thanks, Sarah. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.